The silence was deafening. 6 Navy SEALs, the most elite warriors on the planet, stood frozen in complete shock. Just minutes before, they had been laughing at me, making jokes about my red lipstick and calling me princess. They thought I was some wannabe who had stumbled into their world by accident. They couldn't have been more wrong. Before we dive in, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. My name is Zara Thorne, and I'm about to tell you the story of how I went from being the laughingstock of an underground shooting competition to earning the respect of the most arrogant special operations team I'd ever encountered. This isn't just about proving them wrong. It's about what happens when you refuse to let anyone else define who you are. 3 months earlier, my military career had ended in a way I never expected. I was 28 years old, a former Army Special Forces sniper instructor with more confirmed long-range kills in training scenarios than most people have bad days. But a training accident had shattered more than just my leg. It destroyed my confidence and left me questioning everything I thought I knew about myself. My younger brother Camden, a Marine veteran who knows me better than anyone, could see I was drowning in civilian life. He made a phone call that would change everything. There was this invitation-only shooting competition, he told me. Winner takes 15 grand. More importantly, it was a chance to remember who I really was. The competitors were exactly what you'd expect. Military elite, law enforcement sharpshooters, and private contractors who looked like they'd stepped straight out of a tactical magazine. Then there was me, wearing my signature red lipstick and refusing to apologize for it. I had no idea that my appearance would become the catalyst for one of the most satisfying moments of my entire life. What happened next taught me that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to dim your light to make others comfortable. Sometimes you have to let your skills do the talking. And sometimes the people who underestimate you the most are the ones who end up learning the biggest lesson of all. To understand what happened that day, you need to know where I was mentally 3 months earlier. Picture this. 1 minute you're at the top of your game, training the best snipers in the world, and the next minute you're flat on your back in a hospital bed being told your military career is over. The accident happened during what should have been a routine training exercise. A mechanical failure with the rappelling equipment sent me plummeting 30 feet onto rocky terrain. The doctor said I was lucky to be alive. Lucky. That word haunted me for months. Lucky to have shattered bones that would never quite heal the same way. Lucky to have chronic pain that reminded me every single day of what I'd lost. But the physical injuries weren't the worst part. The worst part was losing my sense of purpose. For 8 years I had been Staff Sergeant Zara Thorne, elite sniper instructor, the woman who could put 5 rounds through the same hole at 800 yards. Outside the Army, I was just Zara, a 28-year-old woman with no college degree and a skill set that didn't exactly translate to civilian jobs. I'd been living in a cramped studio apartment in Colorado Springs, burning through my savings and avoiding phone calls from family. Every morning I'd wake up and stare at my reflection, wondering who I was supposed to be now. The woman looking back at me felt like a stranger. That's when Camden called. My little brother has always had perfect timing, usually when I least want to hear from him. He'd been checking on me more frequently since my discharge, and I could hear the worry in his voice even when he tried to hide it behind his usual Marine bravado. "Z, I've got something for you," he said without any greeting. Camden never wasted time on pleasantries. "There's this invitation-only shooting competition next weekend up in Wyoming. Winner takes home 15 grand. I immediately started to shut him down. "Cam, I'm not interested in playing soldier anymore." "This isn't playing soldier," he interrupted. "This is you remembering who you are. You think your value was tied to that uniform. You think those skills just disappeared because some bureaucrat stamped your discharge papers." He was right, and I hated him for it. The truth was, I hadn't touched a rifle since leaving the hospital. Every time I thought about it, I felt this overwhelming wave of anxiety. What if I couldn't shoot anymore? What if the injury had affected my stability, my breathing, my focus? What if the one thing I'd always been exceptional at was gone too? "The entry fee is 2 grand, Camden continued. Money you don't have, but I've already paid it. You did what? I sat up straighter, suddenly furious. You heard me. The competition is in 5 days. Military elite, law enforcement, some private contractors. These guys think they're hot stuff, and they probably are. But none of them trained under Master Sergeant Rodriguez. None of them spent 3 years teaching special operations how to make impossible shots. I could feel the familiar tightness in my chest that came whenever anyone mentioned my military service. Cam, what if I can't do it anymore? What if I embarrass myself? Then you embarrass yourself, he said simply. But at least you'll know. Right now you're living in fear of a maybe. I'd rather see you fail trying than succeed at giving up. The silence stretched between us. I knew he was challenging me, using the same psychology I'd used on hesitant students for years. It was annoying how well he knew me. Fine, I finally said. But I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not. If I'm going as myself. Lipstick and all. Camden laughed for the first time in our conversation. Wouldn't expect anything less from my sister. After I hung up, I sat in my tiny apartment looking at my reflection again. This time, the woman staring back looked a little more familiar. Maybe it was time to find out who Zara Thorne really was when nobody was telling her who she had to be. The drive to Wyoming gave me 5 hours to second-guess every decision I'd made in the past week. By the time I pulled into the gravel parking lot of the remote shooting facility, my hands were shaking, and it wasn't from the cold mountain air. The other competitors were exactly what I'd expected: tactical gear, military haircuts, and the kind of swagger that comes from knowing you're among the best in the world. Then there was me, climbing out of my beat-up Honda in fitted jeans, a simple black top, and my signature red lipstick freshly applied. I might as well have shown up in a ball gown. The stares started immediately. Conversations died as I walked past groups of men who looked like they'd stepped off the pages of Soldier of Fortune magazine. I could feel their eyes following me, hear the whispered comments that they didn't bother to hide. Is she lost? Maybe. She's here to watch her boyfriend compete. Someone should tell her this isn't a photo shoot. I kept my head high and focused on finding the registration table, but my stomach was churning. This was exactly what I'd been afraid of. I didn't belong here anymore. Maybe I never had. That's when I first heard his voice. Looks like someone took a wrong turn on their way to the mall. I turned to see 6 men in matching tactical gear, all eyes on me. The one who'd spoken was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of confidence that comes from years of being told you're invincible. His name tag read H. Morrison, and everything about his posture screamed team leader. His squad laughed on cue, and I felt that familiar flush of humiliation creeping up my neck. But then I caught sight of Camden across the lot, watching with concern, and something inside me shifted. Actually, I said, meeting Morrison's gaze directly, I'm exactly where I need to be. Sweetheart, he continued, his voice dripping with condescension, this isn't a game. We're using real bullets here. People get hurt when they're in over their heads. The word sweetheart hit me like a physical slap. I'd heard it before, countless times, usually right before I proved someone very, very wrong. But this time felt different. This time I wasn't wearing a uniform that demanded respect. I was just Zara, and apparently that wasn't enough. The harassment escalated during equipment check, when I opened my custom rifle case revealing the precision instrument I'd saved for 2 years to buy. Another SEAL whistled mockingly. Pretty gun for a pretty girl. Does it shoot nail polish? The group erupted in laughter again. I started to respond, but Morrison held up his hand like he was doing me a favor. Tell you what, princess, how about we make this interesting? You beat any one of my guys in the competition, and will publicly apologize for underestimating you. He paused for dramatic effect, clearly enjoying himself. But when you lose, you admit you don't belong here and leave. Deal? The entire facility had gone quiet. Every competitor, every range officer, every person within 50 yards was watching this moment unfold. I could feel the weight of their expectations, their assumptions about what would happen next. Camden had started walking toward us, his face dark with anger, but I caught his eye and shook my head once. This was my fight. I looked Morrison straight in the eye, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. "I accept your terms, but let's make it winner takes all. I beat all 6 of you, and you donate your entry fees to Wounded Warrior programs. $12,000 should be enough to show you're sorry." The smirk faded from his face. "All 6 of us?" "That's right. Unless you're not as confident as you pretend to be." The silence stretched for what felt like forever. Morrison looked at his team, then back at me, probably wondering if I was serious or just delusional. "You're on," he finally said, extending his hand. "But don't say we didn't warn you." As I shook his hand, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. For the first time since my accident, I wasn't running from who I used to be. I was about to find out if she was still in there. The handshake sealed it. There was no backing. Down now, no graceful exit, no pretending this was just a misunderstanding. I had just challenged 6 Navy SEALs to a winner-takes-all shooting competition, and every person at that range was going to watch me either triumph or crash and burn spectacularly. As Morrison and his team walked away, probably to discuss strategy, or place bets on how badly I was about to embarrass myself, I felt the familiar weight of everyone's stares. But this time, something was different. The shame and anxiety that had been eating at me for months was being replaced by something I'd almost forgotten existed: cold, focused determination. I found a quiet spot near my equipment and began the ritual I'd performed thousands of times during my military career. First, I pulled out my compact mirror and carefully reapplied my red lipstick. To everyone watching, it probably looked like vanity or nervous fidgeting. They had no idea what they were really seeing. The lipstick wasn't about beauty or making, a statement about femininity. It was armor. It was my way of refusing to let anyone else dictate who I had to be to earn their respect. If I was going down, I was going down as myself, not as some watered-down version designed to make others comfortable. Camden appeared beside me as I was assembling my rifle. His jaw was tight with barely controlled anger. "Z, you don't have to do this. Those guys are complete jackasses, and everyone here knows it. You've got nothing to prove to them." I looked up from my equipment. Yes, I do. Not to them, but to myself. My hands moved automatically as I broke down and reassembled my rifle, checking every component with the precision that had been drilled into me over years of training. The muscle memory was still there, unchanged by months of self-doubt and civilian life. "What if the injury affects your shooting?" Camden asked quietly. "What if your shoulder doesn't stabilize the same way, or the pain throws off your breathing?" It was the question I'd been avoiding for 3 months, the question that kept me awake at night and made me avoid mirrors. What if I really wasn't who I used to be? "Then I'll know," I said, echoing his words from our phone call. "But I'm tired of living in fear of a maybe." I closed my eyes and let myself remember Master Sergeant Rodriguez, my first sniper instructor. He'd been a hard man who never gave praise lightly, but he'd seen something in me that even I hadn't recognized at first. "Thorn," he'd told me during my final evaluation, "precision isn't about strength or intimidation. It's about discipline, breathing, and absolute focus. The rifle doesn't care if you're male or female, tall or short, confident or scared. It only cares about fundamentals." As I finished my equipment check, I noticed that some of the other competitors had stopped their own preparations to watch me. My rifle was clearly high-end, and my handling of it was becoming harder to dismiss. A few whispered conversations had started, and I caught fragments that made my pulse quicken. "Look how she's handling that weapon. Those aren't amateur movements. Maybe she knows what she's doing after all." The range officer called for competitors to review the course of fire. 6 targets at 600 yards, 5 shots each. Highest combined score wins. Standard precision shooting, the kind of fundamentals I could perform in my sleep during my military days. Morrison's team was clustered together, still confident but paying more attention to me now. I could see the subtle shift in their body language. They were starting to realize this might not be the easy victory they'd anticipated. I walked to the firing line and looked downrange at the targets. 600 yards. In perfect conditions with no wind, it should be manageable, but my hands were shaking slightly, and I couldn't tell if it was from nerves or the chronic pain that still flared up when I was stressed. Camden squeezed my shoulder, gently. "Show them what the Thorn family can do." For the first time in months, I smiled with genuine confidence. Whatever happened next, I was about to find out if Staff Sergeant Zara Thorne was still in there, or if she'd died in that hospital bed 3 months ago. The competition began with Morrison's team shooting first, and I had to admit they were impressive. These weren't weekend warriors or wannabe operators. These were legitimate professionals who had earned their arrogance through years of proven performance. The first SEAL stepped up to the line and delivered 4 shots into the 10 ring with one barely touching the 9. 49 out of 50. Solid shooting that would win most competitions. The second shooter matched him exactly. 49 again. I watched each performance with growing awareness of what I was up against. These men hadn't been chosen for SEAL teams because they were lucky. They were there because they were exceptional, and their shooting reflected that reality. The third and fourth shooters both posted 48 points, still phenomenal scores that would humble most marksmen. The fifth SEAL managed 47, which earned him some good-natured ribbing from his teammates, but would still place in the top 10 at most competitions. Then Morrison stepped up for his turn. He took his time, clearly aware that all eyes were on him. This was his moment to prove that his confidence hadn't been misplaced. His first 4 shots were perfect 10s, placing him in contention for a perfect score. The 5th shot rang out, and after what felt like an eternity, the spotter called out the result. 49! Morrison turned from the firing line with a satisfied smirk, looking directly at me. Perfect 50 to win, Princess. Think you can handle that kind of pressure? The entire range had gone silent. Conversations stopped. Equipment checks paused, and every person there focused on what was about to happen. I could feel the weight of their expectations, most of them probably hoping to see the uppity woman get humbled by reality. I approached the firing line with steady steps, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. This was it. No more second chances. No more wondering what if. No more living in the shadow of my former self. I settled into my shooting position, and suddenly the world changed. The noise of the crowd faded away. The mountain wind became irrelevant. Even the chronic pain in my shoulder seemed to disappear. There was only me, my rifle, and 6 targets 600 yards downrange. My breathing fell into the rhythm I'd practiced 10,000 times. In for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4. My pulse slowed from racing to steady. My hands stopped shaking and found that perfect stillness that only comes from absolute focus. The first shot broke clean and surprised me with its timing, exactly the way it should. Before the sound even reached the targets, I knew it was a 10. The spotter confirmed it a moment later, and I heard Camden exhale somewhere behind me. The second, third, and fourth shots followed in perfect sequence. Each one felt identical to the last, each one finding the exact center of its target. 4 10s, 1 shot remaining. I settled behind the rifle for the final time and found that perfect moment of stillness between heartbeats. The shot broke, and I knew immediately it was perfect. 50. Perfect score. The electronic scoreboard flashed the result, but that wasn't the moment that changed everything. As I stood and turned around, my jacket shifted slightly, revealing a small patch sewn onto the shoulder of my shirt. The reaction was immediate and electric. Morrison's face went completely white. One of his teammates actually took a step backward. The murmur that ran through the crowd was a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and sudden understanding. Morrison's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "Wait, you're Z. Thorne? The Zara Thorne?" I nodded once, not trusting my voice in that moment. "You held the long-distance precision record at Benning. You were the lead instructor at the Special Forces Sniper School." His arrogance had completely evaporated, replaced by something that looked like genuine horror at what he'd done. "For 3 years," I confirmed quietly. The patch on my shoulder was small and understated, but everyone in that crowd of military professionals knew exactly what it meant. The Army Special Forces Sniper School, Elite Marksman designation, awarded only to the top 1% of graduates and instructors. Morrison and his entire team had just spent the morning mocking one of the most respected marksmanship instructors in the Special Operations community. The silence stretched on as the full weight of their mistake settled over them like a heavy blanket. The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever, but it probably only stretched for 30 seconds before Morrison found his voice. Again. When he spoke, the arrogance had been completely stripped away, replaced by something I rarely saw from elite operators: genuine humility. "Ma'am, I owe you a massive apology. What we did today was completely unprofessional and absolutely inexcusable." He looked at his teammates, then back at me. "We let our assumptions override our judgment, and that's not who we're supposed to be." I could have let him squirm. Part of me wanted to make them feel as small as they'd made me feel 3 hours earlier, but looking at their faces, I saw something more valuable than revenge. I saw men who were genuinely learning from their mistake. "Apology accepted," I said simply. "But I need you to understand something. I didn't shoot well despite wearing lipstick. I shot well because I'm a trained professional who happens to like lipstick. The two things aren't mutually exclusive." Morrison nodded seriously. "Understood, ma'am. And for what it's worth, that was some of the finest shooting I've ever witnessed." The crowd that had gathered began to disperse, but I could hear fragments of conversations as people processed what they'd just seen. Word was already spreading about the woman who'd outshot an entire SEAL team and turned out to be a legendary instructor. Camden appeared at my side, practically glowing with pride. "I told you to remember who you are," he said quietly. "I just didn't expect you to remind everyone else too." For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Not the broken version who'd been questioning every decision since the accident, but the confident professional who'd earned respect through competence rather than demanding it through appearance. But the real surprise came 20 minutes later, when Morrison approached me again, this time carrying a folder. "Sergeant Thorne, my team and I were talking. We're not just going to donate our entry fees like we promised. We want to do something more meaningful." He handed me the folder. "We'd like to formally request you to conduct advanced marksmanship training for our unit." I opened the folder to find an official contract request, complete with compensation, details that made my eyes widen. It was more than I'd made in 6 months of struggling with civilian employment. "You're serious about this?" "Dead serious. We came here thinking we were the best shooters in the room, and you just proved we have a lot to learn. We'd be honored to train under you." As I looked at the contract, I realized this was about more than just a job opportunity. This was validation that my skills, my knowledge, my entire professional identity hadn't disappeared with my uniform. They'd been there all along, waiting for me to stop hiding from them. Over the following months, training Morrison's team became the foundation for something I'd never expected: my own elite marksmanship academy. Word spread quickly through the special operations community about the instructor who could make impossible shots look routine while wearing red lipstick. But the real transformation wasn't professional. It was personal. I'd spent 3 months believing that my value was tied to external validation, that without the Army's stamp of approval, I wasn't worth much. That day at the range taught me that respect isn't earned by conforming to others' expectations. It's earned through excellence in what you do. I still wear red lipstick to every training session, every competition, every professional engagement. Not because I'm trying to make a statement about femininity or challenge stereotypes, but because it's part of who I am. And who I am, it turns out, is more than enough. The Academy now trains both military and civilian shooters, and I make sure every student learns the same lesson I learned that day. Excellence has nothing to do with appearance and everything to do with preparation, focus, and refusing to let anyone else define your limitations. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to dim your light to make others comfortable. Sometimes you have to let your skills do the talking, and sometimes the people who underestimate you the most end up becoming your biggest advocates. That's the real victory, not just proving them wrong, but showing them a better way to be right.